Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everyone can hear and see us. Today, we are launching our second investment forum. Despite the difficult times, it lays a solid foundation for studying and discussing Ukraine's investment attractiveness. At the beginning of our events, we traditionally start with respect and gratitude to the armed forces of Ukraine, everyone, including our fellow lawyers who are defending our country on the front lines today. Our second investment forum, organized by the Ukrainian Bar Association, is a leading platform to discuss investment opportunities and challenges facing Ukraine in the context of European integration and future economic recovery. The forum aims to bring together key market players, representatives of the government, business, investors, international financial institutions, donors, diplomatic missions, lawyers, and international partners to discuss strategic directions for development and the creation of favorable business climate. This year, our forum is focusing on attracting international investors, developing strategic industries, and providing legal support for business. Special attention will be paid to issues of digitalization, regulatory challenges, and the impact of European integration processes on the country's economy. The forum will last 2 days. Today we are meeting online and we will have 2 sessions. And tomorrow I look forward to seeing everyone at the hotel. For those who are registered, you will have the location. Thank you to everyone who helped organize this event. We are grateful for the support in organizing this event to our general partner, ICU Investment Group, our partners, Equa Law Firm and Avellum Law Firm, session partners, Adlershaw Goddard, Integritis, and Sayenko Kharenko, like-minded partner, LCF Law Group, and also to all of our information partners. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you fruitful discussions and success at our forum, and together our voices will become louder. With this introduction, I would like to pass the floor now to Ms. Yelena Vishnar-Malinovska, Deputy Director of Ukraine Service in Director General for Engagement and Eastern Neighborhood. I'm very pleased, Yelena, that you had the chance to join us. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Привет to everyone. Very happy to be here, and thank you very much to Ukrainian hosts for convening this very important event. It's really a pleasure to speak in front of you, and I feel also humbled because I'm a lawyer by training, but I never made it to the bar, and I joined the public administration very early in my youth, and work mostly from the perspective of a public administration. Today, I am heading the team that works both on reconstruction and on accession. And you would certainly agree that both of these processes are groundbreaking for Ukraine, but both of these processes need a very delicate legal knitting of norms. Well, first of all, let me start on where the EU stands. We are by far the most stable and the largest donor to Ukraine, because we know that without the EU, it would have been also difficult for Ukraine to decide on its future. And we know that Ukraine has made a choice for the EU future. And this is where we want to see Ukraine in, let's say, a couple of years. First of all, importantly, on the business climate. The business climate is dependable on what kind of norms Ukraine takes over in view of its accession. And here, really kudos to Ukrainian administration, lawyers, but the whole cohort of people that made a very substantive effort so far on the accession path. How does it happen? Well, very openly, it is about comparison of the legal norms on both sides and seeing how Ukraine can align and within which time period. So just to say, we sometimes talk about negotiations, but there's nothing to negotiate in principle. Mostly the timetables or possibly the transitional periods, because we hope that the member that wants to become part of the EU family wants also to take over all the obligations that stem from the membership, but also to align its rule to the European ones. You often hear about overregulation. I can tell you, there has been a major effort in recent years to simplify, to streamline, and we are in particularly very receptive to voices of the business when they highlight if a certain rule is probably obstructing the activities. So on the other side, on the sort of public state side, we scrutinize very diligently the rule of law, the anti-corruption policy. Is the enforcement going on? Is the capacity there to act on a complaint submitted by citizens or by businesses? Because this is very important for a long-term sustainability of any business making in Ukraine. Even ahead of the entry to the European Union, we would like to see the economic ties to be strengthened. And this can happen through what we call the gradual integration of Ukraine. So Ukraine happening, already becoming partner of in certain partnerships, taking over some rules. For instance, we do expect Ukraine to enter the single European payment area, also for the industrial goods to go to the single market without any tariffs. They have to pass the conformity assessment, and this is what we are very much working on. And of course, for the citizens to benefit from, for instance, roaming, we actually also work on aligning these pieces of legislation. So these are already very clear benefits for citizens or for businesses ahead of the enlargement. And this is very important because in the current geopolitical context, it's very easy to tip the public support in one way or the other. So it is important to start showing results early on, even ahead of the accession, that make the proposition by the union really valuable. Secondly, on mobilizing investments. So far, we prepare the investments for Ukraine, and I'm very pleased to say that we support not only the budget of Ukraine through the budgetary support, but we have one of the most powerful secret weapons, as we call it, for investments, which is the Ukraine investment framework. This Ukraine investment framework is important because it helps to de-risk the investments in Ukraine, a country at war, from the perception of the investor, even with the promise of accession, still bears the risks. And this is why the Ukraine investment framework, through the budgetary guarantees and the grants, offers a muscle of 9.3 billion for de-risking the capital investments. Let me highlight a couple of examples. For instance, last year, with support of EU guarantees, a French holding, NGJ, merged two leading Ukrainian telecom providers, Lifestyle and data group Volia, into a single integrated operator. And this was considered as one of the largest investments in the past 20 years. So the largest foreign direct investment. This will help over 10 million people to benefit from mobile connectivity, or 5 million households to gain access to faster and more reliable internet. Those who are now in Ukraine, you know how much digital is important for you. Just in April, again, with thanks to the EU guarantees, we have signed a major deal that supports a private company, OCO, a corporation that will build a major wind park in Volyn with the capacity of 147 megawatts. That again, in times where the energy systems are regularly shelled, and many of them are of course outdated and still Soviet style, it is important that there is a possibility to invest into what is new, what is green, and what is decentralized and probably also secure from the attacks. Now, let me go to the third point on the private sector engagement. And there, I think we really ratcheted our support for the private sector and engagement. It's not a typical area where my institution ranks very high, because we feel ourselves being public officials rather than entrepreneurs, but we do become very much the policy entrepreneurs. And so my message to all representatives of business, but also others here, is that Ukraine does represent a huge business opportunity in the future. We would like the EU-based companies to make the best use of the European investment, to integrate Ukraine into our value chains, and to employ Ukrainians in the companies, because this is a very dynamic country with well skilled workforce in critical areas like engineering, critical materials, or digital. The Ukrainian companies already can apply for the financing opportunities to the European Union. We have a call that is open, that have been extended now, also thanks to the interest, and will run until 10th of October, exactly for companies to signal the appetite to invest, the readiness to engage the equity, and to seek then support from the international financial institutions. This private engagement is definitely supported at the highest level. Prime Minister Schmichal and the Commissioner Kos in April, they launched a business partnership that aims to support the business environment reforms, but also enhance the access to investment financing. So there is a clear support by the leadership. And we hope to see a transformative pipeline of investments and matching between the financial institutions, so the capital that is being offered, and the companies and their needs. Let me move to concluding. It's You know that much better than us here in Brussels, since you are in Ukraine and the time flies differently. It's a moment to act. The needs for Ukraine are huge, 500 billion estimated by the World Bank, with one third to be supported by the private sector. This reconstruction can benefit Ukraine and can benefit the EU, and can modernize the continent and bring a new dynamism to the continent. I'm personally very much impressed by the readiness and level of engagement of European companies in Ukraine, and hope that this will continue. And the European Commission, the institution I represent, is committed to being your partner through financing tools, enlarging market access, and facilitating business friendly reforms. And we are ready to walk this path with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elena, for your kind words, for the optimism, and those things that you already described that are already helping or will be helping very shortly Ukrainian citizens and businesses. We appreciate the support of the European Commission, and we really hope that the accession process will be smooth and fast. And the legal community, together with the business community, obviously is very keen and is happy to support and help with this. With this, I would like to turn the floor to Grygory Ovcharienko, who is our good friend and head of the asset management of the at ICU Investment Group, our one of the major investors in Ukraine and a major trader in Ukraine of Ukrainian sovereign debt. Grygory, we really appreciate ICU's commitment to Ukraine as a country and to our forum in particular. So please share your views on the future of Ukraine and Ukrainian economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, it's my great pleasure and honor to welcome on behalf of ICU Investment Group, the main sponsor of this event. We are proud to support the platform where Ukrainian and international experts come together not only to discuss the opportunity, but also to forge the best way toward a stronger and more resilient Ukraine. We gather today in a time of extraordinary challenge. Despite the war, despite the uncertainty, the one truth remains constant. Ukraine continues to demonstrate its strength, integrity, and commitment to building a modern European economy. Our particular focus at this forum is simple but critical to understand how we can unlock greater investment into Ukraine, even now, even during the war. Ensure that every dollar, euro, hryvnia, penny of capital goes not only towards profits, but towards mutual growth and development. At ICU, we work closely with both Ukrainian and international investors, and we listen carefully to what they need to invest with confidence. And first, they need predictability, rule of law, clear and enforceable contracts. And second, they need alignment with international standards, especially as Ukraine moves towards EU accession. Third, security, and not just physical security, but financial, regulatory safeguards that allow investment to grow, but not erode. And finally, they need partners, real, capable, transparent partners on the ground who understand the risks and how to navigate them. So we must continue working to bring our legal and regulatory frameworks to EU standards, but not just on paper, but in practice. And what we need to do, we just need to remove the outdated restrictions, simplify the currency control, and ensure that our tax and labor systems support innovation. And above all, we must send a clear message to the world. We are not just fighting to survive. Ukraine is building economy to win. And that's why the forum is so important. Over the next 2 days, you will hear the voices across laws, finance, policies, industries. But more important, you will meet the people who are doing the work at war, building companies, shaping legislation, and restoring investment trust. So at ICU, we're proud to be the one of these partners. Thank you. We stand really to work with you in Kyiv, in Brussels, in London, and elsewhere to channel the capital where it is needed most. So thank you for that, and let's start.
Thank you very much, Grygory. Again, thank you to ICU and to the European Commission for supporting this event. And I'm happy now to proceed to our first session on the current state of Ukraine's economy and investment prospects. And I would like to pass the floor to my good friend Dominique Sanders, who is now a consultant at Adolph Goddard and used to be a partner for decades at Linklaters. Dominique, I'm passing the floor to you to introduce our panel speakers, and I'm wishing interesting discussion of the panel. I don't think we can hear you. Well, while Dominic is checking his microphone, what I'll do, I'll help out. I'll introduce whom we already have with us, Brian Best, also a very good friend of ours. Dominic, are you with us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, great.
Thank goodness for that. I'm terribly sorry. I'm hoping my presentation skills are going to be better than my IT. Thank you, Mikola, and thank you, Elena and Grigori, for the very nice introductions. And it's an honor for me to be involved in this and sharing this session. So we'll whiz ahead. I'm going to introduce the panel quickly, and then we're going to get on to what I think will be a very interesting series of sessions. So to start off with, we're going to have Alexander Melnichenko. Alexander's the acting director of Ukraine Invest, which is the government agency supporting bringing in the foreign investment into Ukraine. We've got some very interesting presentation there. He's going to be followed by Vitaly Vavrushuk, head of macroeconomic research at ICU. He's going to give us a bit of a prognosis on the economic situation in Ukraine looking ahead. Third, we've got Dimitar Bogov, who's the regional lead economist for Eastern Europe and the Caucasus at the EBRD. He's going to give us a further perspective on Ukraine's economy and investment prospects, perhaps looking at it more from the institutional investment angle. And finally, we're going to have Brian Best, managing director and head of investment banking at Dragon Capital, who perhaps will be able to give us a bit more of a perspective on private capital. Each speaker is going to talk for about 10 or 15 minutes, and if we've got time, we're going to have questions. Otherwise, I'm going to crack the whip, and we'll have questions at the end. There's lots of really interesting material to talk through, so I'm going to hand over to Alexander to kick off, and good luck, Alexander. We're looking forward to it very much.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to welcome all participants of today's forum. Today, Ukraine offers a wide range of compelling advantages for investors, including significant investment potential, opportunities linked to post-war recovery, transparent legislation, strategic geographic location between Europe and Asia, rapid digitalization, investment incentives, tax benefits and state compensation, low tax rates and fiscal preferences, skilled workforce, abundant raw materials, low production and construction costs, affordable labor and resources, investment insurance, MIGA, ERA, DFC. I will now elaborate on some of these advantages in more detail. I represented Ukraine Invest, the government's investment support office. We are a key part of Ukraine's investments facilitation system, working under the Cabinet of Ministers and in close cooperation with the Ministry of Economy. Ukraine Invest serves as a reliable partner for investors, providing free advisory, legal, and analytical support. We offer comprehensive assistance throughout every stage of the investment process, from the initial contact to full project implementation. Ukraine Invest provides comprehensive support to potential investors planning to implement significant investment projects. Currently, more than 20 companies are receiving consultations on preparing investment initiatives with a projected total value exceeding 2 billion euros. This demonstrates growing confidence in Ukraine as a promising destination for large-scale investments. As of today, Ukraine Invest is supporting 5 investment projects that are expected to be submitted to the Ministry of Economy of Ukraine for consideration as a projects with significant investments. The total value of these projects exceeds 700 million euros. Within the framework of the law of state support for investment projects with significant investments, the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine has already adopted 2 resolutions approving the conclusion of special investment agreements. In addition, 2 such agreements have been signed for projects which were deemed eligible by the Minister of Economy. These developments serve as tangible evidence of the effectiveness of state support for investors and the practical implementation of mechanisms to stimulate large-scale investments in Ukraine. In honor to present the law of Ukraine on state support for investors projects with significant investments, one of key legal instruments designed to provide state support to investors in Ukraine. This law aims to attract private international capital to strategic sectors of Ukrainian economy. Ukraine Invest plays a crucial role of implementing this legislation. The law of state support on investment projects encompasses nearly of major sectors of the Ukrainian economy, including processing industry, extraction for the purpose of further processing and or enrichment of nature resources, waste management, transportation, warehousing, postal and courier activities, logistics, education, R&D, healthcare, arts and culture, sports, tourism, hospitality, electronic communication, production of biogas and biomethane. The law sets accessible thresholds for investments to quality for state support. Minimum investment of 12 million euros, including VAT, creation of at least 10 new jobs, project implementation period of up to 5 years. Investors are eligible to receive up to 30% of their capital investment back in form of state support. For example, a 12 million euros investment may receive up to 3.6 million euros in the form of tax benefits and compensations. Incentives include reimbursement of costs for utility and transport infrastructure connections, reimbursement of construction costs for engineering and transport infrastructure, exemption from corporate income tax, exemption from import duties of new equipment and components, exemption or reduction of land tax or lease payments. Additionally, in the event of disputes, investors have the right to choose the jurisdiction. Despite the ongoing war, investment projects are being implemented across nearly all regions of Ukraine. Investment sectors are outlined in the investment guide, accessible via the QR code at the end of this presentation. This guide will help investors identify optimal opportunities in Ukraine's economy and reconstruction. Despite the war, Ukraine, in cooperation with international and domestic partners, offers robust instruments to protect investors against war and political risks. This included public, international, and private insurance mechanisms, state support, Export Credit Agency of Ukraine. From 2024, Export Credit Agency of Ukraine offers insurance against war-related risks, available for both domestic and foreign investors, minimum 10% projects ownership. International instruments, MIGA, World Bank Group, covers political and war risks. DFC, USA, provides both insurance and financing for businesses, ideal for large-scale strategic and infrastructure projects. Private insurance, ARX, new product with coverage up to $50 million, covers damage from missiles, drones, air defense, debris, and combat operations. Available for industrial logistics, agri-food, renewable energy, and real estate sectors. On the final slide, you will find our contact information and a QR code linking to investment guide, a useful resource to help you identify the most promising opportunities in Ukraine's economy and recovery. Ukraine Invest stands ready to provide comprehensive support to foreign businesses and facilitate the successful implementation of their investment projects in Ukraine. I wish you all a productive event, meaningful discussions, and successful outcomes. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much, Alexander. So that was very interesting. Do we have questions? We've got perhaps room for one or two questions before we move on to the next presentation. I have one question, which as a foreigner perhaps might be relevant, which is obviously when you come to Ukraine, particularly with so many changes, so much going on, it's difficult perhaps to navigate between the various state agencies in terms of some of the help you're providing. It might be customs, it might be the tax authorities. Is that really where you see your value, perhaps in helping to navigate between the different state agencies, and how does that work in practice?
Іноземним інвесторам для навігації на українській системі.
Вельмишановні учасники конференції,
Dear participants of conference,
ви не помилитесь, якщо ви прийдете в стіни Ukraine Invest.
you will be not mistaken if you come to the office of Ukraine Invest for that.
Ми надамо безкоштовну,
We're providing free of charge,
повну, підтримку
full-scale support
юридичну, аналітичну,
in legal,
інформаційну
analytical and informational fields
від початку проекту
from the
і аж до
beginning
його
of
реалізації.
project till the implementation.
У нас зараз на розгляді близько 40 проєктів.
At the moment, we are considering around 40 projects, investment projects.
І це тільки за один рік
And
нашої реальної
This
роботи.
accumulated just during one year of our work,
Серед них є
Not
і
this
іноземні
long.
інвестори.
and including foreign investors too.
Так що ми чекаємо всіх.
So we
Welcome,
are
welcome to Ukraine.
Welcoming everyone in Ukraine Invest.
Very good. And that means that if, for example, there was an exemption from customs, that would you be able to help negotiate with the customs authorities? So when perhaps some materials come to the border, you're able to help, because there are a lot of practical issues, I think, with the situation, which is a difficult situation, understandably.
Питання траблшутінгу – це теж наші питання.
The troubleshooting issues is also our.
Ми в контактах, оскільки ми державна установа,
As we are a governmental institution,
ми в контактах з усіма державними
we
органами.
keep contact with all governmental bodies.
Тому питання траблшутінгу – це вже не раз розв'язувалося нами на різних рівнях.
It's not a single time that we helped companies to
В тому
settle
числі і по
some
митниці.
issues, including with customs too. It's possible.
Excellent. That sounds terrific. Any other questions before we move on to our next presenter? If not, I'm going to say another thank you to Alexander for a fantastic presentation, and it sounds like you're doing very valuable work. So I'm going to invite Vitaly Vereshchuk, Head of Macroeconomics Research at ICU, to tell us a bit about how he sees Ukraine's economy developing. Vitaly, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dominic. My pleasure to give a presentation about key macroeconomic developments in Ukraine. And I will start by saying that if I were to give just one word to describe the Ukrainian economy, the Ukrainian people, I would say it's resilience. So economy proved to be extremely resilient to all types of external shocks. Ukrainian people proved to be very resilient. Ukraine's financial sector, banking sector proved to be very resilient. Economic situation has stabilized after it was basically in a free fall in 2022. So in 2022, Ukraine's GDP fell by 29%. We lost almost 1/3 of economic output, but we had quite a quick rebound in 2023. So now we are close in terms of GDP. We are at about 77 to 78% of the pre-full invasion level. Not only the size of the Ukrainian economy changed, but also the structure of the Ukrainian economy changed significantly. So you can see the numbers in the right-hand table. You see how substantially the share of government consumption increased in Ukraine's nominal GDP. So it more than doubled if we compare this 38% with 18% that we had in 2021. And this is fully understandable. Ukrainian government has to spend lots of money on defense-related tasks, and that's why government consumption is playing a very significant role in the current situation. And another thing that I would like to highlight is a significant decline in exports. So export contributed roughly 41% to the Ukrainian GDP in 2021 before Russia's full-scale invasion, but its share fell substantially. Now it's less than 30%. Over the past couple of weeks, I guess everyone read that many agencies, IFIs, downgraded their projections for the Ukrainian economy for 2025 for many reasons. It's getting more and more difficult for the Ukrainian economy to grow. And one of the reasons is that we have a significant shortage of labor. Another big problem is that many companies, many sectors of the economy are underinvested. We need to significantly upscale investments to have higher rates of GDP growth. And you understand that investments are quite risky in the current environment. So we expect that Ukraine's economy will continue to grow in 2025, 2026. But if safety risks don't improve substantially, this growth is going to be quite moderate. So we expect growth slightly below 3% in both 2025 and 2026. And once again, I want to emphasize that this projection is based on an assumption that safety risks don't improve substantially. If Ukraine reaches a ceasefire agreement deal with Russia, this may be a game changer. I guess we'll see a significant increase in investments, we'll see a return of Ukrainians from abroad, and we'll see significantly higher economic growth in 2026. But at this point, we remain on the conservative side and sticking with our projection of 3% economic growth this year and next. I move on. We are now on the inflation slide, and inflation has accelerated substantially. So inflation is significantly above of what the NBU and government and I myself expected like 6-9 months ago. So inflation was quite a negative surprise. Annual CPI is now close to 16%. But we clearly understand why the inflation rate is that high. The primary reason for high inflation is a decline in agricultural harvest in 2024. We had droughts throughout the summer, and the harvest of grains, oilseeds, fruits, vegetables declined substantially. So we are still feeling these very negative effects of lower agricultural harvest that we had back in 2024. Another contributor to inflation is a hike in energy prices for Ukrainian businesses, and also a significant growth in wages that businesses have to pay to their employees, and higher wages are being passed on to the final consumers, to the buyers of goods and services that are produced by the business. Okay, inflation or close to 16% is not what we like, but there is also good news. The good news is that inflation is going to decelerate substantially in the coming months. So we will see, we will already see a substantial deceleration this June. In June, I guess, inflation will slip back to below 15%, and it's going to be on a decelerating trend over the next 9 to 12 months. So I guess the key inflationary risks have already materialized, and we are now approaching the cycle of decelerating inflation. Okay, inflation is not what we like for one simple reason, especially is not what we like in economies that go through significant challenges, that go through the war, because inflation may undermine confidence in the local currency. People may start, households, businesses may start to switch from local currencies to foreign currencies, to dollars, to euros. Did that happen in Ukraine? Fortunately not. Despite very high inflation, the confidence in local currency has been preserved, partly because NBU had quite an effective response to high inflation. NBU started to hike the key policy rate. The key policy rate is now 15.5%. In response, government increased the yields on sovereign bonds that are being sold to banks, to local businesses, to local population, and also banks increased substantially interest rates on their deposits. And that means that people who have savings in hryvnia can receive a significant remuneration, significant yield on their savings in hryvnia. They don't have incentives to switch into foreign currencies. And if we look at the banking sector statistics, we see a steady and a quite significant growth in hryvnia deposits of both businesses and households over the past couple of years. So I want to emphasize one more time that despite significant inflation, despite significant macroeconomic risks that we continue to face, the local currency is remains. So people, households and businesses continue to prefer hryvnia, continue to prefer local currency and to foreign currencies. So we have savings in hryvnia significantly exceed savings of households in dollars and in euros if we look at the banking sector statistics. So, of course, Ukrainian economy has to face significant imbalances. Imbalances of external accounts widened substantially after the start of the full-scale invasion by Russia in 2022. And on the left-hand chart, you can see how the current account, the deficit of the current account of Ukraine widened over the past couple of years. The key reason for external imbalances, for growing external imbalances, is the deficit of trade in goods. Ukraine continues to import substantial amount of consumer goods, of investment goods, but mostly military equipment. Ukraine needs to buy lots of weapons, lots of military equipments, and that's why imports remain quite robust. On the other hand, export of goods from Ukraine fell substantially in 2022, and they have been recovering very slowly since that time. Ukraine lost many export-oriented businesses in steel sector, in iron ore sector, and it's very difficult to for Ukraine to regain, to increase exports and regain its international markets. So we are facing very substantial current account deficit, which means that the NBU has to cover this deficit with its gross international reserves. And on the right-hand chart, you can see how significant the NBU interventions are. So basically every day, the Central Bank of Ukraine has to sell $100 to $150 million to maintain the stability of the foreign exchange market and to maintain the stability of hryvnia exchange rate. So this deficit in the FX market has been close to $3 billion per month over the past 2 years. So how can NBU maintain stability in the FX market? Where does NBU take its resources to conduct everyday interventions? And the answer is very simple. Ukraine is relying on foreign financial aid that has been constantly provided by our international partners, by Ukraine's allies. The total volume of foreign aid since the beginning of full-scale invasion has already exceeded $100 billion. And Ukraine has been receiving this foreign aid from multiple sources, from the IMF, from the United States, from the EU. Now Ukraine is receiving money under so-called ERA program, which is extraordinary revenue acceleration, which is basically income on Russian frozen assets that is being provided by the G7 countries. So since the start of full-scale invasion, Ukraine had an inflow of more than $40 billion per year, and obviously NBU could use this money to intervene in the FX market and maintain the stability of hryvnia exchange rate. So the NBU reserves, as you can see on the right-hand chart, have been at a very high, very comfortable level. So NBU has always had firepower to control the FX market. But of course, the key question is what's going to happen in 2026, 2027, and in future periods. Will Ukraine be able to receive foreign financial aid of that size? Unfortunately, now there is less and less clarity about where this foreign financial aid will be coming from. For 2026, we have commitments from our partners that are close to about $25 billion. This is obviously not enough for Ukraine. This is not enough for the NBU to maintain stability of the FX market, and this is not enough for the Ministry of Finance to fully cover the state budget deficit. So obviously, government, Ministry of Finance will be looking for additional sources of funding to make sure that the needs of Ukraine in 2026 and beyond are fully covered with foreign financial aid. But so far, so good. We have had very stable situation in the FX market. We have had very stable exchange rate, which fluctuated in a very narrow range over the past 12 months. And I think we have very good preconditions for the NBU to maintain hryvnia exchange rate in a relatively narrow corridor over the next 9 to 12 months. And my final slide is about fiscal risks. Fiscal risks are also significant because Ukraine has to spend substantial amounts of money to fund its defense sector. We cannot collect more taxes than we collected before the start of full-scale invasion, but our expenditures are now significantly higher. And this huge budget deficit is now being covered with foreign financial aid. So still, Ukraine managed to narrow the fiscal deficit. So we started with a state budget deficit of about 27% in 2022 and 2023. And you can see that it's narrowing. It's been narrowing over the past 2 years. So in 2025, we are going to have a state budget deficit of probably close to 19 or 20% of GDP. So we are going through this process of fiscal consolidation, but of course, this process, we cannot accelerate this process. We cannot expect that fiscal deficit will be close to 10%, as it is now projected in the IMF program. Fiscal deficit is going to be much higher than 10% of GDP in 2026. And like I said, Minfin and government will now be looking for additional sources of funding for 2026 to make sure that Ukraine is able to fully cover the needs of the military sector, of the defense sector, that Ukraine is able to pay salaries to soldiers, to pay salaries to public employees, and to maintain macroeconomic stability. So to summarize, I would probably say that we continue to face many challenges. Thanks to our partners, we had we properly, government and the NBU properly addressed those challenges over the past 3 years. And we do hope that Ukraine's international partners will maintain their support in the coming years. Ukrainian economy will critically depend on foreign financial aid in the future, and it's important for our partners, our allies, to understand that financial support is what makes our economy stay afloat, what helps Ukrainian army to defend Ukraine. And we hope these inflows of financial support will continue uninterrupted in the coming years. I will stop here. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Vitaly. That's very, very interesting. I see we have a couple of questions in the chat. I don't know if you could you can see them. We've had one from Klib Antonov saying that perhaps the hryvnia relative strength is perhaps as much a function of the limitations on the levels of currency that can be bought monthly, and maybe that's helping to prop up the hryvnia. Do you think that's true, or perhaps that's I hope we're not being too optimistic, but maybe that's a factor.
Sure, the NBU restrictions on the purchases of foreign currency do play their role. They do play a role, and it's fully understandable that NBU has to maintain those restrictions. But if we talk about an average household, I think those restrictions are not binding for, let's say, 98% of Ukrainian households. So if people want to convert their hryvnia into dollars or euros, they can open multiple bank accounts at different banks and use their limit several times within a month. So, but still many households, the vast majority of households, prefer hryvnia to foreign currencies. So I guess it's a good indication that people maintain their confidence in the national currency, in the national economy, and they believe that macroeconomic stability is here to stay, at least for the next couple of years. So yeah, I would only partly agree with that statement.
And we had another question about the ERA, obviously very important on your slide, relating to the deficit and the big projected decrease in 2026. So a question from Ihor Olechov saying, would the EU, do you think the EU would ever agree to transfer the frozen Russian assets to fund the needs of the war and the reconstruction? Because I think at the moment they're just, certainly in the EU, they're only paying you interest on the deposits, the frozen funds within Euroclear, rather than handing over the principal. So do you think that is a development we could see, and that could perhaps help close the deficit or help alleviate it?
Well, that would definitely be an ideal scenario for Ukraine, an ideal scenario. So Ukraine has to ask for more and more money from its international partners, while Russian money is frozen, immobilized, and it would totally make sense to use this money to help Ukrainian economy now during the war, and also after the war, during the reconstruction stage. How realistic it is, hard to say for me. It's hard to say for me. I can only say that we definitely see that the rhetorics of the G7, many G7, the majority of the G7 countries, is changing. So we are hearing more and more voices in favor of confiscation of Russian assets. I don't think we are very close to this point. I think it will take another couple of years for the G7 countries to make the final decision. But I think that we are moving in that direction right now. But of course, this is a unique process. So we don't have any similar. We never had similar situations in the past. So we have to. So this is the process with a huge surrounding uncertainty. So I'm optimistic, but I cannot say that this will happen 100%.
Thanks, Vitaly. I can't resist asking you one other question, even though we've got a bit of a time constraint. But you mentioned the poor harvest in 2024. Obviously, that had, I think, as you said, an impact both on inflation and the balance of payments in terms of exports, the diminution in exports. But I wonder what the harvest for 25 is looking like, and whether that might help both in terms of the balance of payments and possibly the inflation rate.
We expected a significant rebound in agricultural harvest this year. Probably the situation is not going to be as optimistic as we expected a couple of months ago, because we again had some weather problems which destroyed the harvest of some fruits in early spring. But if we're talking about the harvest of grains, oilseeds, and vegetables, I think it's too early to say. We have to understand what weather during June and July is going to be. Those are the two critical months for the harvest. Preliminary indications are that harvest indeed is going to be at least slightly higher than in 2024. But once again, let's see how weather changes over the next 2 months. This has always been a big uncertainty. the major uncertainty when it comes to forecasting inflation and foreign trade balance, and we don't have a clear understanding at least until late July, early August. So situation looks much better this year, but I don't want to make optimistic projections at this point.
You've spoken like a real farmer. Always always pessimistic till you've completed the harvest. Quite right. Vitaly, thank you so much for that. Very, very interesting and a really great presentation. We're gonna rush on because time is short. So I'm going to hand over to Dimitar, if that's all right. Dimitar, over to you.
Thank you, Dominic. Well, let me and thank you for the organizers, Ukraine Bar Association, for this excellent event and for inviting me to present here. Let me try to share my presentation. Can you tell me if you see my screen?
Looks good to me.
Okay, great. And in my presentation, I have actually three points: war economy, structural changes and major trends. And actually, I will skip this part because it fully overlaps with what Vitaly presented. Thank you, Vitaly, for that. This will enable me to focus more on the second and third point. By the way, our views on economy and on prospects are fully in line with what Vitaly presented, and I think the continuation of the war actually means more or less the similar picture as he presented here. But on the other hand, potential ceasefire brings some opportunities for reconstruction, investments, and post-war recovery. And let me focus actually on this portion of my presentation. So I will jump to the first slide that starts with that. So ceasefire would inevitably bring some peace dividend, and the growth in the first year would be substantial because of that. But there's a big difference whether this ceasefire would be fragile, which means without security guarantees, with uncertainty about the future, or sustainable ceasefire, which would bring sustainable peace with certainty that there will be no another Russian aggression in the future. So a fragile ceasefire would create a situation of a vicious circle, I would say, because of the uncertainty. Not many people that were forced to emigrate will return. This will not lift demand, it will remain weak. This means insufficient investments, and this in turn brings sluggish growth. And if there's no growth, there will be no job creations. So again, we are coming into the situation that if there are no jobs creation, why people would return? So a kind of vicious circle that would maybe the first year create a strong growth because of the peace dividend, but later the growth prospects are not bright. And the other scenario, which is sustainable ceasefire, which means confidence, enthusiasm for reconstruction of the economy, and then, yes, people will return. This will drive private investments because demand will be rising income. This will create strong growth. Strong growth opens new jobs, and new jobs attracts even more people to return to the country. So a kind of virtuous circle, so opposite of the previous one. But this is beyond our Sorry for this. Sorry for this. So, as I mentioned, this is beyond our power. We cannot know what will be the future, but concerning post-war recovery, actually, this is a complex and challenging task. And if we look at RDN, Rapid Damage Needs Assessment, the most recent one, which assesses recovery and reconstruction needs, they are enormous, more than 500 billion US dollars for a period of 10 years. This means that every year Ukraine should receive investments of around 50 billion US dollars in order to reconstruct everything that was damaged and reconstruct in a build better way. If you look deeper into this estimate, we can see that actually around 22% of this relates to commercial sector. And in commercial sector, investments are coming mostly from the private sector. So domestic, but FDI could also play a prominent role here. Then 16% are in housing sector, where we think private sector could play a significant role, but providing this access to bank financing, and that is very important prerequisite here. Of course, there's some component of social housing that could be satisfied by government funding and maybe some donor programs, but still significant part could be left to the private sector and efficient financing. Energy and extractives, 13% of the total needs are in this area, and these sectors we know that are dominated by state-owned enterprises and some domestic large private corporations. Still, here there's big room for involvement of strategic and portfolio of foreign investors, but later we will see what conditions they need for that. Around 15% of the needs are in transport infrastructure, and here we think about roads, railways, bridges, ports, airports. State investments here are probably the core, but still there's some room for private involvement through concessions, PPPs, but still this has to be developed in a consistent and very attractive framework in order those private investors to be attracted. The rest of the needs are in sectors like health, education, demining, and here actually investments would come from government and international donors. Very, very few of these investments could come from the private investors. However, to attract private investors, they need good business climate, rule of law, level playing field. We are all aware that there are many constraints in Ukraine: administrative capacity, the rule of law, corruption, procurement policies, institutional capacity. Fortunately, there's consensus about the reconstruction ecosystem in Ukraine. There are three pillars in this: Ukrainian ownership, and I think all agree about it. International support will remain very important. And EU integration is a very important incentive, but also a driver of reforms. And reforms will be crucial in creating this good environment. And then we come to these orange bars, which represent 8 areas which need actually to be intervened and to set the right infrastructure for attracting investments. And let's go a bit more detailed in each of them. First is prudent macroeconomic policies, because without a stable macroeconomic environment, we cannot talk about attracting investments. And therefore, we need a return of the pre-war monetary policy, inflation targeting, and also to guarantee the independence of NBU, which is extremely professional and capable institution. Fiscal policy should add additional element of stability, and here we need a consistent tax policy, broadening of tax base because of the fiscal issues that Vitaly was also talking about. And it would be very important to avoid tax breaks. Ukraine should attract investments based on other qualities, not on giving such incentives. Reforms in SOE sector is very important, and those reforms are ongoing. They should continue. The next are procurement policies. We know there will be a lot of opportunities, a lot of public works, but this needs robust and transparent procurement policies. Some elements and phases needs to be streamlined, but this should not be on the cost of transparency and sustainability assessments of public procurements. Then reconstruction of vital infrastructure. In the initial phase, we have to see a restoration of electricity system, restore gas supply, heating. This is important for people to return in the country, but also for businesses to restart their operations. And in medium to long term, energy system should be rebuilt fully on clean energy, using new technologies for generating heating, green cities model, so building back better. Housing stock, it's also important element. As we mentioned, if people return, they will need to repair the housing which was destroyed during the war. And so enable affordable bank mortgage loans. So some work in the banking system, in the financial in general, is very important in order to develop this housing market to work. Public services everywhere where people live, not just in some areas, but everywhere where we want people to return. So education, health services, social services. And here it would be very important to pay attention on veterans, on single parents, on disabled persons. All this is important element for building an inclusive society after the war. And this brings us to human capital, which was severely damaged during this war. Therefore, reintegration of war veterans in the labor force, provide therapeutic and counseling support for veterans, enabling conditions for single parents, for women to enter the labor market, because Ukraine will need labor, and there will be deficiency of skilled labor force. Structural reforms are important element, and when we talk about structural reforms, we need, in the first place, reforms in the governance area, anti-corruption. So all that is needed to enable a level playing field in Ukraine. And this actually is crucial for attracting private investments. And the last but not least, strengthen the capital of the banks. Currently, banks are quite, I mean, they're doing well, judging by the numbers they're presenting, the results they show. But the right picture in the banking sector we will know once the war is over and asset quality review is conducted there. Then probably there will be need for injecting of new capital. We know that more than 50% of the banking sector is in state hands. state finances would be overstretched and state would not be able to recapitalize. So maybe that is a possibility to attract new capital in the banking sector and in the same time privatize state-owned banks. This is important because a lot of financing can come to the banking sector. Those banks that are already there and those that could come in the future could draw finances to from the parent banks, and this capital could be channeled to the reconstruction of the Ukrainian economy. I would stop here, and I apologize for my voice.
Thank you, Dimitar. Thank you very much for that and persevering with your cough.
Dominic, you're on mute.
I actually think he's frozen, Mikola. If you don't mind, Mikola, while we're waiting for Dominique to rejoin the meeting, there was a question for Dimitar that was in the chat, which was asking about, of the more than $500 billion of restructuring funds that will be needed for Ukraine, how much of that is estimated for the occupied territories, the currently occupied territories?
Yes, this is a good question, but also quite tricky one. We were making some estimates, and these are rough estimates, of course, but it seems that around 1/3 of the total assessed damage is in those territories that are not currently under reach of Ukrainian government.
Yeah, but I suppose that, you know, the extent of the damage and the extent of the needed reconstruction in those areas is much larger than in other parts of the country. So I would assume that, you know, of a total reconstruction budget, a much higher proportion would be in, you know, for the currently occupied territories. There's been so much more destruction there than in other parts of the country.
Yes, indeed. And that's why actually we talk about 20% of territory being occupied, but it has a share of around 35 to 40% in the damages that are assessed.
Right, right. Any other questions for Dimitar? If not, I can start talking.
Yes, yes, please, Brian. I'm sorry for the connection. Apparently, we rely too much on the technology, but I realize that we are running out of time for the first panel. But we definitely want to hear, Brian, your view as a very seasoned investment banker who continues doing deals in Ukraine despite everything, and I know personally that you continue living in Ukraine. So tell us about your perspective. Are there any opportunities that you would definitely point investors to?
Yeah, thanks. And for sure, I you know, the speakers before me, I think, did a fantastic job sort of laying the groundwork and explaining, you know, the positives of investing in Ukraine, but also some of the challenges of investing in Ukraine today and going forward. You know, I would say that, you know, right now is probably the tightest M&A market that we've ever seen in the country, and it's for obvious reasons. I mean, it's asking investors to invest in a country that is currently at war and undergoing regular missile and drone strikes is a difficult undertaking. It's, you know, with that said, we're still seeing investors that are coming to Ukraine, and you know, it was Alexander Melnichenko's presentation where he highlighted, you know, the reasons why investors, you know, should be looking at Ukraine right now. I think it was very comprehensive, and it tells a great story. And I think that there are investors that are looking at the country even now. In fact, I had a meeting with one yesterday that's interested in buying a company here in Ukraine that would benefit dramatically from a post-war reconstruction effort. So they are here. Most of them, however, that are investing in the country currently have prior experience here. And that's something that you saw also in Alexander's presentation. There was a slide that showed, you know, the map of Ukraine, and I think that there were, you know, 5 or 6 companies that have invested under this program that he was presenting. All of those companies have prior experience investing in Ukraine. Some of them are Ukrainian companies themselves. So, you know, the number of absolutely new investors that are looking at Ukraine during the war is unfortunately quite few. And, you know, the challenges are the obvious ones that I've already mentioned. I mean, the fact that we're at war, but there are other issues as well that are maybe not so obvious. And the ones I'm thinking about are, you know, for example, just the fact that there's a captive, there's captive money in the form of hryvnia, the Ukrainian currency, in Ukraine. So companies, many of the people on this call probably know that we were involved in a transaction recently where we sold Uklon, which is the largest ride-hailing company in Ukraine, to Kyivstar, which is the largest mobile telecommunications company in the country. The reason why that transaction even happened is because Kyivstar continues to generate a lot of cash flow in hryvnia, and that hryvnia is captive in Ukraine. They cannot export that hryvnia, they can't exchange it into dollars and export it out of the country in sums that would make any real significance to them. So they need to do something with that money. And so they're actively looking for places to invest. The trick, however, is that, well, they have to invest in hryvnia. So on the one hand, you have companies that are flush with capital, local currency capital, but you also then have to find a seller that is willing to accept hryvnia as payment for their business. So, you know, even though the Uklon Kyivstar deal, which was publicly announced, was a $160 million transaction, it was all in hryvnia. So all that money is still here in the country for the 5 founders, or excuse me, the 4 founders that sold the business. So that's one of the challenges, and it's a big challenge because very few companies, there are some that are able to do have large, you know, foreign currency reserves outside the country that can buy Ukrainian assets and pay in foreign currency, but those are very, very few. So it makes the business of buying and selling assets or attracting investors extremely difficult. It also poses another problem, is that if an investor does come to the country and invests a substantial amount of capital, I mean, they really have to understand that, you know, the capital controls are going to be in place certainly throughout the war and perhaps even for a period of time after the war. So, you know, the money that they invest will be also, you know, for the most part, captive in Ukraine. There has been some liberalization of those capital controls over the past 12 to 18 months, which has given, you know, some boost in you know, investor interest, but it'll be a while before there's a free-flowing capital in and out of Ukraine. The other issue, and I think it's related, is that asset prices are still relatively high. You know, if you look at the fixed income market, I mean, most corporate bonds today are trading in the, you know, mid 80s, low 90s, you know, which is, you know, given where they were when the war started, it was an incredible comeback. But generally speaking, asset prices are still high, and I think that one of the reasons for that, especially on if we're talking about corporate assets, is because of this captive Ukrainian currency in the country. There's still a lot of transactions that are happening between Ukrainian company and Ukrainian buyer and Ukrainian seller. And that's keeping demand for business still quite high, and therefore asset prices are on the higher side than what we would normally expect them to be in a country that's at war. You know, but with that said, I mean, we have an asset management business as well. We have actively been in the fundraising process over the past 6 months. The fundraising, you know, I think is going quite well. All of the investors that are investing in the fund, at least 90% plus, are DFIs. So, you know, it's the DFIs that are continuing to support and invest in Ukraine. Private investors still haven't made a big push into the country. And so I think that this is, you know, unfortunately, one of the challenges that we're going to face in the next year, 2 years, is trying to convince foreign investors to invest in a country that's a war, to take advantage of those things that Alexander Milichenko's presentation highlighted. And, you know, I think the time will come. I was a little bit surprised that we didn't see a larger push from Western financial and strategic investors after the transaction to buy LifeCell and Data Group Volia assets. One of my colleagues in the business from a competing firm, we were at a conference in London, and he said, all Ukraine needs is one large deal to show up on the front page of the Financial Times, and then all Western investors are going to rush to the door of Ukraine and start investing. I kind of bought that. I thought that was a great analogy, and I kind of expected that what we would see after that large $500 million transaction, that we would see a lot more investors, large investors, taking a look at opportunities in Ukraine. We did see that, you know, shortly after that transaction. We had a couple large family offices that were expressing interest in large investment opportunities in Ukraine, but just for one reason or another, just couldn't get traction. So unfortunately, we're kind of left with, this Ukrainian to Ukrainian M&A market, still hoping and still pushing and trying to convince investors that not everything is so bad here in the country. And, our portfolio, just looking at Dragon Capital as a whole, every single crisis that we have experienced from 1998 until this one, our book value dropped at least 50% at the start of the crisis. And it took us a year or two to not only get that back, but then some. This is no exception. It's just that this has taken a bit longer because the war continues to rage on. So, we have seen our book value drop, probably more than 50% since when this war started. We've built back our business to pre-war levels, but we won't see a real improvement in our total portfolio until asset prices, readjust to a post-war level. And that'll only happen, I think, once the war is over. That's all I have for you, Dominic, unless you have any questions.
That's fantastic. Really interesting. Thank you. There is one question on the chat about, it's a very nifty question about whether Ukraine can in some way use FX hedging to take advantage of the depreciation of the US dollar at all. I might not have. I don't know whether that's a question for you or for one of the more kind of macroeconomic or regulatory types. But that I suppose might help Ukraine's sort of economic situation in terms of its deficits. Another question I had, was obviously we've seen a lot of few announcements on defence. So obviously Rheinmetall's the big one everybody's heard of, but actually I think yesterday Renault, there was a discussion about Renault manufacturing drones. So I suppose maybe defence might be a sector where there might be an exception to your.
Yeah, thanks for raising that question, Dominic. I actually had it written down here. It's something I wanted to touch upon. This is one of the areas where we are seeing a real appetite starting to develop from foreign investors. It was difficult in the beginning because the impression I think that most foreign investors had, and I'm talking about strategic investors in the military-industrial complex in the West, the impression that they had was that Ukrainians were basically just buying a bunch of components that are almost commodity type components and just assembling them in Ukraine. And that's not what the military-industrial complex of Europe was really looking for. They were looking for new technologies, better programming, completely new designs in UAVs, etc. And I think that the successes that the Ukrainians have had on the battlefield using some of these new technologies has really piqued the attention of a lot of foreign strategic investors in this space. And on top of that, again, talking about captive money, the EU, basically came out with a program to increase investment into this sector, suggesting $800 billion of new money to invest in the expansion of the European military-industrial complex. And a lot of that, not a lot, but some of that money will find its way to Ukraine, because this is where these technologies are being used successfully, and quite a few European and American military companies have been looking at Ukraine and contacting us and asking us to help them in this effort to find good investment targets. So that's been successful.
And maybe one or two will be allowed to export as well, because I know that was a big bone of contention. Some of the drone manufacturers I read the Ukrainian drone manufacturers said, you know, we can sell this stuff and generate and grow faster. But obviously that's a difficult one. I think we're slightly in the on the naughty step on timing. Mikola's been very polite, but we probably ought to call that to a halt. I'm sorry if there were. I certainly had lots of questions, but people I'm sure can follow up afterwards. Thank you so much to all the presenters. It really emphasises the importance of foreign investment, and I really hope that all of us can take the information that's been delivered in the session away to talk to our, in the case of lawyers, our clients, our contacts, and really try to help generate the foreign investment that Ukraine really needs. And I think there is opportunity. We just need to help explain it and make it happen. So thank you very much for everybody, and back to you, Mikola.
Well, thank you, everyone. It was very interesting discussion, different points of view on the economic side. And thank you, Dominic, for moderating the session. It's really insightful questions and insightful answers to our audience. And hopefully many of people who listen to us drew some positive conclusions, despite some of the pessimism that we also heard at this panel, during this panel. So without further ado, I would like to announce that we have now a short presentation from Alina Martinishin, Head of Corporate Partnerships at United 24, who will speak about the impact investment in Ukraine via United 24. So, Alina, I hope you can join us, and please, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm really glad to meet you all here tonight. Not tonight, today, sorry. Just 1 second, I'm going to share my screen for the presentation. Okay. Can you hear it and see it? Everything works?
Так, все працює.
Perfect. So I would like to start with a few words that when people now hear about Ukraine, they think about destruction. And that's what I believe previous speakers have also mentioned is one of the challenges in investing to Ukraine. However, we at United think of reconstruction, of an opportunity and impact that matters now and echoes for decades. So when we talk to potential partners of United 24, we always say that imagine your capital being able not only to generate financial returns, but saving lives, rebuilding critical infrastructure, generating, creating, or developing new markets in a country that is fighting for its future every single day. And that's exactly what United 24 offers, a platform that turns charity into impact investment. A few words about United 24. I hope that many of you here have heard about United 24 already, but for those who haven't or who want to know a bit more details, United 24 is the official fundraising platform of Ukraine, launched by President Zelensky after the start of the full-scale invasion in 2022. So basically, after the start of the full-scale invasion, it became clear that people across the world, they want to support Ukraine, and they support Ukraine with the help of international organizations. At the same time, it became clear that no international organization, no matter how well established and organized it is, can fully meet the needs of a country as large as Ukraine during the war for various reasons. But one of the main challenges is that those international organizations, Ukraine is not their main and only focus, and they have different procedures and planning, long-term planning. So just to give you an example, the funds raised in 2022 by some of these organizations were to be spent in 2024, but people needed help here and now on the ground. And local Ukrainian charities, they were not focused on the Western market, they were focused on the local audience. So it became clear that Ukraine needs its own fundraising platform, its own tool that will be also known abroad. And this is how United 24 evolved. And also this platform needs to work closely with the ministries in charge of different directions to have the helicopter view on the most pressing needs, what is needed the most here and now and where. So now the platform runs for 3 years. with donations from over 120 countries. 100 of funds without operational fees go directly to special charity accounts at the National Bank of Ukraine with no operational fees. So for operational fees, United 24 seeks for separate operational donors. And we understand that for many donors, the transparency is sufficient, and basically trust and transparency is one of the main capitals when you work in fundraising. So Deloitte Ukraine is a platform auditor. So, and reports on the funds raised and spent are updated weekly on United 24 website, and also we frequently post it in our public communication in our own media. So today, United 24 also is proud to have 26 ambassadors, ranging from think tanks as Francis Fukuyama, historian Timothy Snyder, to celebrities in different spheres, sports, music, arts, movies. So the singer Barbara Streisand, NASA astronaut Scott Kelly, entrepreneur Richard Branson, and many more. These figures help United 24 not only to raise funds, but also to advocate for Ukraine, to keep the world focused around Ukraine, which is a challenge when the war lasts not 1 year, not 2 years, but already 3 years and even a bit more. And we understand that Ukraine basically is competing for attention, not only with other wars, with conflicts, crises, natural disasters, but we compete in news with US global policy, with Kanye West, P. Diddy, you name it, with everything that people can see in the news. So public figures help us to raise funds efficiently, but also to draw attention to important issues that are going on in Ukraine. Here is the photo from United 24 Summit, which takes annual place in Kiev, and key partners, donors, and ambassadors visited. United 24 today has also a lot of local and international partners from different spheres, ranging from Microsoft, Visa, Balenciaga, EPAM, Spotify, and many others, who either make donations or we make collaboration with them and joint fundraisers, or sometimes even creative projects. United 24 also has quite a wide digital ecosystem because we have two main focuses. So there is United 24, which is fundraising platform, and also United 24 Media, which delivers the news about Ukraine, and it's the largest English-speaking media from Ukraine and on Ukraine. So we have two websites and a wide presence on all the major social media platforms. If we were offline, I would have asked the audience to raise the hands who has shared United 24 video at least once or reposted in any social media. I'm pretty sure that many of you did. And we reach approximately 75 million unique accounts per month via all these platforms that we own. Basically how it works, this whole ecosystem, because we work with public figures, we work with partners, there are also just common people, donors across all the world who donate. So this ecosystem works like this. Donors from across the world, they can either donate directly via our website to a project of their choice, or there are also some projects that involve both ambassadors and partners, or just one of these figures. And then the help is directed to the recipients of help in Ukraine. Basically, we're connecting people for the good. How does it work more precisely? So today, United 24 has 5 directions of support, which is medical aid, procurement of equipment, rebuilding the hospitals that were destroyed during the war, education and science, where we focus on rebuilding schools, equipping bomb shelters, providing power generators for school, humanitarian demining basically for civilians. And this is one of huge challenges because Ukraine is the most mined country in the world. And even when the war finishes, it will take decades to demine Ukraine completely. And of course, defense. And donors, they can choose the direction of the support. They can either support the direction in general, or our team can prepare a tailor-made custom proposal, an charitable object that meets their needs, a perfect match and win-win that highlight their corporate social responsibility or is tied to their area of operation and brand DNA. So just to give you an example, for instance, while working with one of our partners, AVT Bavaria, who are official dealer of BMW in Ukraine, so they're working in automotive. For a long time, they were supporting the rebuilding of bridges. We've rebuilt together dozens of bridges in the east of Ukraine, and each bridge had a memorable plaque with the AVT Bavaria logo. So basically, when people are crossing the bridge, they can see thanks to whom this bridge was rebuilt. Or while working with Glovo, delivery tech app, we've been raising funds together. So they made a contribution, and also there was a fundraiser in their app for their audience towards logistic robots. So basically the robots that will deliver supplies, food, water, in the areas where Glovo couriers can't in the front line. Another example is a large campaign with Uber, which was called Keep Ukraine Moving. This is a partnership with the global office of Uber. So basically, United 24 was integrated in Uber app in 19 countries. So whenever in these countries people were using Uber, they had different options apart from ordinary Uber X, Uber Black, or Uber One. They also had Uber for Ukraine, where each ride was $1 more expensive, and this $1 were transferred via procurement of ambulances via United 24. And also Uber has constantly made corporate donations to this project, and there was a fundraiser on United 24 platforms. So all in all, we have managed to raise approximately $5 million towards ambulances. And just to illustrate what it actually means, I would like to show the video.
Люди були в паніці, хтось шукав своїх родичів, моторошно було.
Нам було передано тяжку жінку. Це той випадок, коли рахунок іде на хвилину.
Забирали жіночку з ампутаціями, з політравмою.
У неї був відкритий перелом нижньої щелепи, травматична ампутація обох нижніх кінцівок.
Я транспортував і надавав допомогу чоловіку. У нього була достатньо важка травма опорно-рухової системи, стан його був критичний.
Забирали жіночку теж тяжку, там поранення бідра було.
Забрали ми чоловіка, у нього пошкодження грудної клітки. Досить було тяжко з ним комунікувати, так як чоловік під час вибуху втратив свій слуховий апарат.
Хочу подякувати Uber.
Дякуємо Грамелі.
Я хочу подякувати Укрсиббанк за таку карету швидкої допомоги. Ми можемо дуже швидко добиратися і дуже ефективно та якісно надавати допомогу. Машина високого класу дійсно рятує життя.
So basically, during two recent attacks on Sumy with missiles, a lot of people were injured. There were also some dead, unfortunately, and the ambulances procured, thanks to United 24 partners, were saving life with medics on site. And this is what we say, that what is most important for us, it's actually the life saved thanks to support of our partners. However, I also think that while listening to this keynote, some of you might question, okay, but what is the return on investment? Because we understand that return on investment is possibly the most common metrics when it comes to investment topic. So the return on investment when we're talking about charitable projects via United 24 is first of all capital efficiency, tangible effect. Each dollar converts into life saved, into lands demand, into hospital rebuilt. Reputation return on investment, thanks to United 24 ecosystem, high presence on social media, support of celebrities and renowned partners, partnering with United 24 enhances brand image. and long-term security return on investment. Helping to Ukraine means investment in security, not only of Ukraine, but of Europe. Also, security of businesses, supply chains, which have long-term effect. Just to illustrate this, I would like to give such an example as one of the projects United 24 was made is a fundraiser towards sea drones fleet. So basically, those sea drones that prevent attacks, Russian missile attacks from the sea, who sometimes also disturb Crimean Bridge. But what's also important, they were important tool in securing grain corridor. So United 24 was raising funds toward them, and partners were welcomed, as well as public donors, for a donation that covered the cost of one sea drone. The company could have given it a name, make a vote among their stakeholders, among their clients, audience, or stay anonymous, depending on their choice. So basically, if they decided to name a sea drone, we've made a visualization of that. We've communicated it on both social platforms of us and our partners. But what's important here, imagine that you are working in a sector that is directly linked to the export, agricultural, logistic, manufacturing. And while investing in such a drone, and the only way to invest in such a drone is actually via such a charitable cause, because this is not something you can just go directly and invest to otherwise, as a military tech development, you're actually not just helping other people, you're not just saving lives of Ukrainians in general, however those Ukrainians might be your employees, your clients, your partners. You're actually investing in security of your business and business opportunities. At the same time, where we can see a direct link for those companies who are interested in export, regardless of the area of operations, security is something that involves all sectors of economy. So basically, this is investment important for all sectors of business. And I would like also to show you one video. This is a report video of United 24 results at the end of 2024, which will probably speak better than all the word that I can say.
With you, we've been able to raise all the funds we need.
We raised the funds for Ukrainian school which been bombed by Russia, because children is our future for all.
Будинок, який ми з вами відбудовували, завершено. Родини повернулися. Життя повертається.
There's 327 pupils. They need a bomb shelter.
Thank you for standing with Ukraine and supporting United 24. You are the force that makes a difference.
As I said, that was report video at the end of 2024. So now the amount of funds raised via United 24 is $1.4 billion within the 3 years of operation, which makes United 24 the most efficient charitable Ukrainian organization in terms of fundraising. And to finish my presentation, I would like to quote the President Zelensky, who says, "Your money is not a charity, it's investment in the global security and democracy that we handle in the most responsible way." So in case some of you here would be interested in co-authoring Ukraine's recovery with United 24, would be happy to connect. So you can connect me via LinkedIn, my personal one, or via email at partnership.united24.com. Thank you
very much. Thank you very much, Alina. This is a very insightful presentation, and I'm sure many people have not heard so much detail about United 24, and it was important for them to know what you are doing. So thank you again. Thank you for supporting Ukraine, and thank you to everyone who supports United 24.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I would like to turn the floor now to our second panel, to the moderator of our panel, Olyana Gordienko, who is the corporate governance advisor at Investment Capital Ukraine Investment Group, and is a good friend of ours. We have a panel of brilliant speakers from various law firms who will happily share their views from the legal perspective about doing business in Ukraine. And I will be happy to join the panel as well. So Olyana, please take over.
Thank you, Mykola. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'll sort of start with saying that it's not exactly a very legal panel, although, you know, the lawyers are on the panel. And Igor, could you please, yeah, and Mariana, could you please switch on the video as well? So we have Mykola, who is a partner of Avalum in corporate M&A, Vitaly Odjikovsky, who is the tax partner from Sayenko Kharenko law firm, Igor Olehov, who is the also M&A, but mostly banking, finance, capital markets partner from CMS, and Mariana Marchuk, who is the labor counsel at Baker McKenzie. And we, you know, when preparing for the panel, we actually, you know, sort of all of us admitted that we should all be grateful to Baker McKenzie, because despite that Mariana is the only one who is still a long-standing employee of Baker McKenzie, all other four, even myself, are alumnus of Baker McKenzie. So I mean, that's obviously poor coincidence, but still. And why I mentioned that the panel is not only legal is because at certain points, every lawyer maturing in a law firm and working with clients actually starts thinking and acting more like an investment banker. And since the market of investment bankers, for obvious good reasons, in Ukraine has significantly deteriorated at some point, you know, you have senior lawyers and partners who actually act as deal makers and sale people. But what is different from the pure investment banking is that this is a full cycle proposition. So the lawyers would typically be interested not only to get the client into the country, but also to work for the client, you know, while he is in the country, and also ideally act on the sell side. So Mykola, I mean, can we start with you? And I understand you'll be covering the exit and corporate and M&A aspects of investing and doing business in Ukraine. And there are a lot of misperceptions, especially during the wartime, about you know, legal system and different aspects of doing business in Ukraine, how difficult it is to enter or exit Ukraine, as, for example, Brian Best mentioned during the previous panel. So could you please sort of do the kickstart and tell us, how do you think the legal system in Ukraine now is? And also, do you still do deals with the English law?
Yes, I'll answer the second question quickly. Yes, we still do deals under English law, but Ukrainian law is quickly taken over because Ukrainian legal system is actually quite harmonized now with the EU legislation in many respects. Of course, not in all. But if I may, I would like to take a few moments, since we are talking about direct investments into Ukraine, to remind everyone, so what are the key requirements for foreign direct investment in any country? And quickly demonstrate how Ukraine meets them. So I thought about it, and apparently there are such probably around 8 to 10 requirements. There should be available workforce, natural resources, logistics, fair and preferably low taxation, stable and fair regulatory environment, little state intervention and more state support, cheap credit, loans, and of course, the rule of law, everyone keeps mentioning it. And if you look now in Ukraine, from the perspective of these requirements, Ukraine has a population of roughly 35 to 40 million people. Of course, some people have left. At the same time, we're talking about post-war Ukraine reconstruction. But even now, we have 30 million plus people still living in Ukraine. We have various natural resources like various natural natural resources and minerals that everyone talked about for the last few months, forests, land, agriculture. We have actually a very extensive rail and road network. We have a fairly stable tax rate, and my colleagues will be talking more about that later. We have of course, licensing and regulation in Ukraine, but to give you an example, licensed activities dropped from 40 plus to 33 in the last 10 years, and it's dropping. The regulatory checks are available and are happening, but of course, that is part of the normal way of life, especially when you're talking about public companies that have major effect at business. Lending is still available, but of course it's expensive, and everyone is talking about the rule of law, but and it's not the point of our discussion today, but I must say that in terms of the judicial reform and anti-corruption reform, Ukraine has made a tremendous progress in the last years in making sure that the speed of decisions is quite high, the decisions are transparent, they are publicly available, and they are fairly consistent. So from that perspective, I think Ukraine actually poses a great opportunity for many investors. And in my personal view, I think there are too many misconceptions and partially Russian propaganda about difficulties of doing business in Ukraine. Now, if you turn to corporate, which is my core area, well, establishing business presence in Ukraine is super easy. It takes less than a day with a fairly minimum set of documents that is standard around the world, basically, at least in the democratic countries. Many people think that private property is not protected, but this is the opposite in Ukraine. Actually, Ukraine has one of the best systems of public registers in the world that covers real estate, corporate register, judicial register, powers of attorney register, and dozens of other registers. There are also, Ukrainian IT specialists are famous now around the world, and one of the applications that has been developed is various chatbots that provide opportunities to investors to actually track in real time what is going on with their company. It's an easy one-stop shop registration. You don't need to run around various state organizations and bodies to register the company. You can do it with a private notary that has access to most of these public registers. So from the corporate perspective, it's fairly easy to open a business. There are some nuances about the labor issues, and Mariana will definitely mention them. But many people also think about that Ukrainian law is not up to Western standards. Well, again, that's another myth, because Ukraine started active harmonization of its legislation since 2014. And it has been speeding up since that period. And at the moment, we can look at many areas and see that the legislation is up to best standards, and in fact is harmonized with the EU legislation. If you take corporate area, Ukraine has done a tremendous job in improving the major legislative acts that govern a basic corporate entity, which is a limited liability company. It's very flexible, adaptable, and you can pretty much build whatever corporate governance structure you would like to have. There is, of course, another type of entity which is more difficult and more regulated. It's a corporation, or what we call a joint stock company. But like in many other jurisdictions, these types of entities are destined for those who would like to tap capital markets and or to be in the regulated sectors, for example, in banks, in the banking sector. So again, I remember when I started my career a few decades ago, and there were tons of questions about corporate governance and whether you can structure in such a way that investors are safe and are happy about what is going on with the management, and that the management does not steal, basically. Well, this is not an issue anymore because, as I mentioned, of public registers and flexible corporate governance mechanisms that are available in Ukraine. Many people talk about bureaucracy. I'm happy now that many Ukrainian businesses and individuals and citizens have had exposure to doing business in the West. And many people now realize that bureaucracy, on the one hand, is a necessary part of making sure that the consumer is not affected in a negative way by various negative practices of businesses, that consumers are not fooled by businesses. On the other hand, bureaucracy, of course, can be a big break for businesses, and many businesses, of course, don't want to have extra bureaucracy. From that perspective, Ukraine again has moved tremendously in eliminating a lot of the red tape that was before, especially due to digitalization and improvement of simplification of various processes. This is not to say that we don't have anything to improve. In fact, I have a long list of things that could further improve, but usually these are issues where business has interactions with the government. You're talking about licensing, special sectors, banking sector is very regulated, financial institutions as well. Of course, defense production, now everyone talks about it, is a highly regulated sector. But most investors are interested in something more mundane. FMCG, healthcare, real estate, etc. In most of these sectors, there is little regulation that meets the minimum required in any democratic country. So to sum up, in my view, there were a lot of negative intentional propaganda about Ukraine sponsored by Russia, but a lot has changed. And I think even in the last 2 or 3 years, many things have happened that are addressing the issues of the war risks. So, for example, I remember having this discussion 2 years ago in Washington, and at that point, we only saw the emergence of various types of political and military risk insurance. Now that is more available, we wish there was more, but it's already available. This is a tested mechanism. There are various mechanisms of sovereign guarantees and direct loans to private companies, and this is also a tested route. In many cases, it's the Ukrainian companies that are contacting various donors and IFIs and are proposing various projects that would also cover the guarantees and direct loans. I think we can safely say that the judicial reform has actually happened, and the system is working. There are constant new selection of judges happening. We wish it was faster, etc. But at the same time, the system is working and it has cleansed itself tremendously. And finally, Brian mentioned one of the transactions that has happened last year, NJJ invested together with Horizon Capital into creating a major telecom operator in Ukraine. Several of the firms present here have been involved in this transaction, but this is due to the fact that the private equity funds like Horizon Capital are still in Ukraine. They continue investing in Ukraine, and even more, they continue to raise new capital for potential investments into Ukrainian businesses, including impact investments, but also pure private equity investments. So I'll stop here. I'm sure you have questions to me and my colleagues. I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mykola. It sounded a bit brighter than I expected, but we'll I hope deal with that, and get a bit of a pepper of reality later after we hear all the colleagues. Mariana, I know that many foreign investors perceive Ukrainian labor law as an archaic Soviet-style, sort of not modernized set of rules and regulations. How would you comment on it? And has it been sort of modernized, evolved since the times?
Okay, so my view is that it's definitely not true anymore. Let me share my my screen. I can tell that currently, in spite of what you might hear from such people who are all, gloom and doom, it's not true. The current Ukrainian law is modern, updated. It does not impose any rules that would not be present in any other jurisdiction where your company might be operating. So it's updated. Anything you want. Do you want remote arrangements? You have it. Do you want regulation of work of your personal servants? We have it. Do you want on-call employment fixed-term agreements? We have it. Do you want to fire your manager with whom you are not happy? If it's a corporate officer, you can do it. So definitely, I don't share this pessimistic view. Ukrainian law, labor law, is currently very, very pro-employer. You just have to know it and to use it. So on this slide, which will be later sent to all participants, you can see the three forms of engagement of individuals that Ukrainian law currently offers. We will focus on employment agreements and contracts, on labor law. I must say that the Ukrainian labor law not only was updated to match the global economy, the current state, but also there have been certain amendments done and are continuing to be introduced to meet the specific issues that employers encounter in connection with war activities. So such instruments are available as electronic exchange of documents under certain conditions, but you can do it. You can now change substantial terms of employment of employees basically with 1 day notice. You can shorten or deny some types of vacation. As a matter of practice, as far as I know, none of our clients has had to resort to such measures as denial of vacations and so on. But the main point that I want to make is that the Ukrainian law is currently adapted not only to the modern economy, worldwide economy, but to the war environment. Generally, I want to say that the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian workforce is educated, industrious. Of course, you have lazy people, but you have them everywhere. Just use your judgment when you select your candidates. Very important, the Ukrainian workforce is not litigious, which is a big advantage. Normally, we don't see among our clients, we don't see much activity of trade unions, work councils. There are certain regulations that require sometimes consultations with these bodies, but relative to what you see in other countries in the EU, even in the United States, it's very, very easy, believe me. You can live with it, and yes, you address it if it arises, but it's quite manageable. It has never been an obstacle to any of our clients, never. It arises very rare, and none of the clients has had any major issues with it. So what is important? The Ukrainian labor law is very much form over substance. So you do need to set up your operations correctly from the start, develop a good employment agreement, develop a good job description, correctly select a job title for your employees, have policies in place, importantly have them in the Ukrainian language and communicated to the employees against evidence of receipt. But this requirement is not unique to Ukraine. It exists pretty much in every developed country. So nothing new here. Labor inspection exists. And employees can complain there, but even if they come, which is relatively rarely among our clients, if they come for an audit, they review the case. If they detect some violations, they just require that you remedy this violation, and only if you don't remedy within 1 month, only then you may face a fine. So it's very, very lenient, I would say, in Ukraine to have employees. If you have operated in Germany or France or in the United States, I can guarantee you will find it very easy in Ukraine. I want to mention that the Ukrainian migration law is very, very favorable to companies. If you do need to bring a specialist, whether it's high-skilled foreigner or maybe you require low-skilled workforce, for any type of employee, you spend 2 weeks to obtain a work permit. Yes, you have to present some application, not overly complicated, but you don't have requirements like obligatory announcement and waiting period, which exists in many, many other countries. You just go to the employment center, you submit your application, you explain in the application why you need this particular employee to be employed. Maximum 2 weeks, you get a work permit. Only if it's a Russian or Belarus citizen, then yes, it may take longer on the current environment, but otherwise, show me a country where you can get a work permit for within 2 weeks. I can guarantee you can. And finally, I don't share also the gloom and doom of, oh, there is shortage of workforce, people are staying in Europe, they will never return. Yes, we do see currently shortage of skilled, let's say, blue-collar employees, and for obvious reasons. Many of these men have volunteered to the army, many have been mobilized. So yes, in this fragment, yes. But to say that you cannot find employees in Ukraine, I would say it's a big, big stretch. Everything is possible. Our clients have been operating without any issues for the last 3 years. The surveys of the American Chamber of Commerce show that the mood is quite upbeat. To to the extent it can be upbeat in the current environment. So to sum up, you definitely do not face obstacles in finding employees in Ukraine or in managing them. Just do things correctly, set up your operations well from the beginning, and you will not have any employment-related issues for many years of your successful operation in Ukraine.
Thank you, Mariana. Sounds to me like a good advice from a lawyer. Hire a good lawyer and you'll be fine. Igor, how would you sort of assess the current access to funding and currency control restrictions? Because that was actually what Mykola referred as some nuances or negative sort of comments from the first macroeconomic and economic panel, that the funds are captive in Ukraine, and that's obviously has an impact. And of course, investors would not want to come invest and then be stuck here forever.
Yes, thank you, Olyana. Thank you for this opportunity and for giving me the floor to express my views, what is happening with the Ukrainian currency control rules and how basically Ukrainian banking system and financial system survive the war. First of all, I want to mention that things, in my opinion, are actually better than many people appreciate and many people think about in terms of currency control rules and in terms of what is happening. Because first of all, the financial system and the banking system, they survived relatively well the first year of war, and the second and third year of war, we have seen that actually the banking system and financial systems, they have shown resilience. The exchange rate of hryvnia to foreign currency is relatively stable, and the National Bank of Ukraine is basically controlling the situation, so to say, in terms of introducing various safeguards to protect the banking system, the financial system, but also liberalizing gradually the transactions which permit to incentivize investment of foreign investments and the flow of capital into Ukraine. And obviously, many people are not happy because of these restrictions, because we had immediately after the war started a moratorium on payments, on a significant number of payments. And this moratorium was still is in place, but it was significantly changed, and a lot of these restrictions were lifted to permit businesses to function in many areas, and to permit financing to flow into the country and out of the country. And in fact, while I prepared for this short presentation, I checked ChatGPT and Gemini how many times the National Bank of Ukraine changed resolution number 18, which is the principal resolution by which they introduced the moratorium. And actually, both of these AI instruments, they have failed to calculate the number of changes because they just told it was so numerous changes which were made during the last 3 years that basically they cannot keep count on them. And ChatGPT suggested that maybe there were 5 major changes, but the rest they cannot calculate how many changes happened. So this is just a demonstration that a lot of these foreign currency rules, although they are changing quite often and they are restrictive, but it is possible to find a way with the regulator to actually work with these foreign currency rules, and even with these restrictions which exist for payments of old loans disbursed before 2003, for payments of dividends which accrued before 2004, and many other restrictions. There are still opportunities which you can find within these regulations, and and basically transfer a portion of your profits outside of Ukraine. And of course, the positive thing is that the regulator in Ukraine is very flexible and is ready to meet the demands of businesses. In terms of practical examples, I want to give just one example of what we did, for example, with export credit agencies. Export credit agencies, they initially also face the same problem with the moratorium on the projects which they financed, but some of their products, like buyer's credit, this is the way to finance receivables of the foreign suppliers, they did not fall under these exemptions which were set out in the documents of the National Bank of Ukraine. And we convinced actually the export credit agency with which we work to approach the National Bank and the Ministry of Economy to actually change the concept which these exemptions provide for. And although it took us a few months to convince basically the regulator that they need to implement this wider exemption for export credit agencies, we managed to do it, and this was quite, I would say, successful in terms of perception of Ukraine and Ukrainian foreign currency rules by export credit agencies. And actually, after these changes, the number of projects which they do in Ukraine has actually increased. Another thing which I want to mention, and which was mentioned by Brian actually before in his conversation, that as a result of these restrictions for foreign currency rules, we have quite a lot of cash which is stuck in the system, and which cannot leave immediately the country, which on the one hand may be perceived as bad by foreign investors because they cannot really transfer profits, but on the other hand, this makes them actually think about what they can do with this cash in Ukraine. And we have seen not only transactions like Kyivstar Uklon, which have been done in Ukraine, but we have seen that some of the existing players like Nestle, or like, for example, McDonald's, because they cannot repatriate profits, they are just expanding significantly. And if you look at the amount of funds which is invested by McDonald's into new restaurants these days, you will be surprised that the war does not stop them to expand, actually. But this is a result of these restrictions, but also of creative thinking, how they can expand in this situation in Ukraine now, where assets are actually cheaper and opportunities are abundant, and you can use these opportunities to actually expand in this environment rather than wait for the war to end or for the risks to be reduced. Of course, additionally, I want to mention that because of the war, the IFIs are now very active in financing various projects in Ukraine. And in fact, we have seen that during at least the last 2 years, there have been already fast investment into the equity capital of Ukrainian banks by IFIs. This is Bank Lviv transaction on which we actually worked. There was also acquisition finance aspect of this deal, which was mentioned several times, the biggest deal, Engine J Horizon Capital, but we have not mentioned that there was also an acquisition finance element with EBRD providing the principal financing for this deal. And actually, even before the war, we have not seen acquisition finance deals in Ukraine. And then this will be also the second acquisition finance deal in Ukraine after Pharmac deal, also during the wartime. So overall, I would say that in spite of the war, the financial sector is surprisingly resilient, healthy, and provides actually opportunities for companies to develop and expand in Ukraine. And last but not least, of course, we have seen the insurance products, political risk, political violence, war risk, so-called war risk insurance. This was not available at the beginning of the war. Now, after 3 years of war, the market actually has developed already a practice of selling such products, of course, with certain limits, and in some respect they may be perceived as expensive, but at the same time, there are regions of Ukraine where you can negotiate quite healthy rates with the insurance and reinsurance brokers for these products if the risks are perceived as too high. And maybe the last thing, I prepared presentation which I'm not sharing in detail because of time constraints, but which I will just show that is available. And if somebody is interested in minute detail of Ukrainian foreign currency rules, you are welcome to review it after this. And in response also to comment from Olyana that I'm involved in banking M&A, I want to stress that now, because of the war, probably for international investors, it's high time to focus on investment into the banking sector, because the opportunities which exist now in this sector for investors, both debt and equity investors, they are enormous, and you would not actually have these opportunities after the war or in any other Eastern European country in the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Igor. And Vitaly, Igor mentioned in the beginning of his intervention that it's actually good that the currency control regulation keeps being volatile and changes numerous times. On the other hand, you are a tax expert, and I guess for a foreign investor, it is important, that it's stable, and the assumption or misperception may be that, for a country in war, it is logical to increase and keep increasing the taxes. So would you please make your intervention on how you see sort of the tax environment attractiveness rate for the foreign investment?
So I think we have to start from this question would be better to ask for the companies, for the businesses which act in Ukraine as of now. We should ask this question, for example, in addition to what Mykola and Igor said, Nestle or Lifestyle Company, we should ask for Philip Morris Ukraine, which had opened a new factory in Lviv region a year ago. A few days ago, I've been to this factory, celebrating the anniversary of this factory, and they opened a 5-star bomb shelter with the shower, with conditioners. That was great. So we would give this question to Unilever company, which are trying to build, which are in process of building a new factory in Bila Tserkva right now. So those companies which are now in Ukraine, they realize that this is, like Andy Hunder says from American Chamber of Commerce, it's not risky to invest in Ukraine. It's risky not to invest in Ukraine. And those companies which in Ukraine right now, they realize this situation. They realize that it is okay to work here. They realize, of course, that we have some damages. We have some problems with the protection, military protection, but this is the time to expand the market. This is the time. Ukrainians are continuing what Mariana said. Ukrainians are not lazy. Ukrainians are business driven, and of course we are trying to do our best as of now. And about the stability, Ukrainians we like tax advisors, we are always in a battle with Ukrainian parliamentaries, with member of parliament, and we have a rule in accordance with the tax legislation. We have a rule that the taxes cannot be changed for less than half a year to the next tax year. Yeah, this rule is subject to a break. Yeah, actually, this rule is always under the challenge, but we have to understand that Ukrainian tax rates are one of the lowest in the European Union. For example, like the Ukrainian corporate income tax is the 18% for more than 10 years. Ukrainian personal income tax is 18% for more than 10 years. So basic tax rules are very stable. Yes, we have amendments of a tax legislation in Ukraine, of course, but let's look at those amendments. That's those amendments which are in line with OECD guidelines. We are trying to be in line with EU regulation. Like, for example, CFC rules or CRS system, those are the rules which are usual Europeans get used for as 5 or more years. So that's the rule which is not a surprise for any investor in the world. And we are now trying to implement those rules in Ukraine. The second issue is that about the stability. Of course, maybe this rule about the 6 months prior to the next tax year is broken by the Ukrainian parliament. But let's be honest, every implementation of new tax legislation is being the subject of a discussion with business and parliaments and tax authority. All of us know about the ongoing tax implementation, ongoing tax amendments. We always discuss this, and Ukrainian non-governmental authorities, business is able to make an impact on this legislation. So we have a lot of, prior to some tax amendments, we always are gathering into the business meetings, we are gathering with parliament, members of parliament, we are meeting with tax authority, we try to discuss this, and they understand our word, our voice is heard by the government in Ukraine. And the second issue that, it is just as a simple example of Ukrainian taxation system is the beginning of the war. And a lot of Ukrainians get rid of Ukraine. They relocated. I think a lot of Ukrainian business owners, net worth individuals, they relocated to other countries, to European countries, to America, to Canada. But the fact is, being as a tax consult, almost all of them, they are trying to get rid of foreign tax residency. So they are saying, no, we want to be the tax resident of Ukraine. Let's get rid of a tax residency in Spain, in France, in Portugal. I want to be a tax resident in Ukraine. Of course, they are, from one standpoint, maybe this is caused by the patriotic views, but I think that this is caused by patriotic views and by the taxation rules. Because in European Union, in foreign countries, taxation influence upon the income is much more higher than in Ukraine. And that's the big point. The second issue, the final issue I would like to show is the Ukrainian IT regime. All of us know that Ukraine is some kind of a tax haven for IT regime in Eastern Europe, in Europe at all. And just an example, the main cost of IT companies in the world is the cost for salary. So the salary is the main expenses. All of the expenses for IT companies consist of salaries, almost all. Salaries and marketing. And in Ukraine, the special tax regime called DIA City provides opportunity to pay only 10% of taxes for salary. So that's the lowest. I think that's even below the threshold for the countries which are blacklisted, which are called like tax havens in the world. So I think, we understand in Ukraine, we have a lot of battles we have a lot of trouble. Ukrainian tax authorities are very aggressive, yes. But, they are aggressive, but at the same time, we have Ukrainian courts, like simple example. In the Netherlands, for example, they always try, all the taxpayers, they are trying to negotiate with the taxpayer. In Japan, a few years ago, I have talked to the lawyer from Japan, and he told me that all over Japan, they have only 7 court cases on taxes, related to the taxes, all over Japan. Other cases are resolved by means of negotiating between taxpayer and the tax authority. In Ukraine, we have another culture. We have to understand this. Yes, Ukrainian tax authorities are very aggressive, but still Ukrainian courts are making this process. Ukrainian tax courts are ending this process as a part of a tax negotiation. Another example, more than 90% of tax assessments made by the tax authorities are canceled by the Ukrainian courts. So every taxpayer understands that he is protected. If tax authorities are aggressive, he can go to the court, and the court, if this tax assessment is not in line with the law, the court will cancel this tax assessment and everything will be okay. So in general, I do not see any problem here. We have some cultural peculiarities, but we do not have troubles. That's for sure.
Thank you, Vitaly. So those were sort of a short overviews, and actually, each of the intervention seemed, quite bright to me, almost like a legal fairy tale. So maybe let me just drop the question to the speakers and ask, what are the pitfalls, except those which were slightly mentioned? What are the major sort of things which you hope need to change, like shortly, to make it even better?
Well, if I may start, if you don't mind. Sure. Of course, we keep thinking about what we can improve. And I've already mentioned before that the challenges that foreign investors face are in those areas where there's a lot of dealing with the government. One of such areas, for example, is when you talk about production sharing agreements in the energy sector. That area has been substantially improved, and before the war, we had quite a few public tenders for extraction licenses. But when you actually win the tender and the auction and proceed with the negotiation of the production sharing agreement, you deal with quite a lot of agencies, and you have to take into account too many interests of various government organizations. It could definitely be streamlined. But apart from things that come from the past, I would also focus on the future. So, for example, immigration policy. Mariana mentioned this already, that this is not such an issue. And yet, I think, without disagreeing with Mariana, Ukraine, if it wants to become a strong player in the future, will need to think about smart immigration policy to attract new workforce. And we're talking about bringing Ukrainian citizens back to Ukraine, but also about potential immigrants. And we need to carefully think about which countries these immigrants come from, both from the cultural perspective, from the religious perspective, etc. But Ukraine does not need to invent things from the scratch. There are great examples of actually attracting immigrants, like the United States did in the second part of the 19th century with various Homestead Acts that actually provided incentives for people not only to come and be in the country and benefit from the social welfare, but also to actually work and invest. And as I said, Homestead Acts, for those who are not familiar with them, is a great example. I would definitely Google and read how they worked. Another issue, again, turning to experience of the United States, is the GI Bill. It's obvious that veterans are a big issue for Ukraine even now, but after the war, it will definitely be a major issue, and we'll need to, as a society, as a country, deal with that factor and also try to absorb the veterans back into the society so that they actually benefit from being as part of the society. GI Bill in the United States serves as a great example where government was actually providing loans to people, to veterans who wanted to set up business, provided low interest mortgages for those who are willing to build their homes or buy new homes, and provided scholarships to those who wanted to go to universities. I think that's a great way forward. I won't touch upon taxes. I think Vitaly is much better placed to talk about that. But I think that we can look at some of the examples in the EU and Switzerland, for example, in terms of reduced VAT in some specific areas. Same with the distributed profits tax. But one thing that is close to my heart is state-owned enterprises. Ukraine right now is in a unique point of history. We have so many now state-owned enterprises in the government hands that have been either nationalized even before the war, or the assets that have been seized by the government from former Russian owners. The quality of these assets is very high compared, and this is nothing compared to, it's much better compared to what it was after the breakup of the Soviet Union. We're talking about major bank institution like Privatbank, major oil and gas company, Ukrinafta, etc., etc. And it would be a missed opportunity if Ukraine went and totally privatized these companies into the hands of strategic investors like BP. So Ukrinafta becoming a BP subsidiary or Shell subsidiary in Ukraine is of course great overall, but you could do better, I think. Ukraine could definitely use this opportunity of state-owned enterprises to jumpstart its capital markets and as a second line to jumpstart its private pension system. Ukraine is a large enough country to have strong capital markets, and the state should be the leader in this by actually taking these state-owned companies now and bringing them to do the IPOs in Ukraine. And you of course can sell up to 49% on the liquid market, and then the majority stake, the 51% stake, sell to a strategic investor that will lead the company, of course, and the government should not keep these state-owned enterprises. There are numerous challenges about state-owned enterprises. Ukraine has been greatly criticized about handling of the governance in these companies. Things are improving, and despite numerous scandals that have happened, Ukraine is on the right track of actually complying with the OECD guidelines for state-owned enterprises. So I remain optimistic that we are on the right track, and I hope that whoever is listening from the government and the donors will take account that this is a great opportunity not to privatize, but actually take companies to do the IPOs in Ukraine.
Today is in fact 30 years anniversary of the Ukrainian capital market. So what you really meant is to sort of boost it up, because allegedly, it has been created 30 years ago. Anyone else want to add to that? I know, Igor, you like the topic of state-owned companies and the corporate governance.
Yes, this is the biggest, always the biggest topic for any large financial institution in Ukraine and IFIs which work in Ukraine. And unfortunately, some of the practices which have been in the past with state-owned enterprises, they were not up to the standard of management of these assets by the state of Ukraine. In my personal opinion, and maybe the government will disagree with this, but I think overall the management of state assets has to be given to professional asset managers with international reputation, like the big asset managers which have worked in other neighboring countries, in particular in Romania, in Georgia. And actually, they need to be assessed on a maybe mid-term basis how they perform actually and what they do with this asset. And in this manner, I think the whole culture of management of these assets can be changed in Ukraine. Of course, now this is probably difficult to do in some sectors like energy because of the constant drone and missile attacks. But in some sectors like mining, like probably some infrastructure projects, this is something that can be done even now. And maybe it's the right time to do it now because the challenges that Ukraine faces are such that actually these changes can be introduced. In terms of other problems which exist, I would say that, of course, the foreign exchange and capital movements, they will gradually change with the end of the war and will normalize to acceptable levels. Again, my personal opinion that the whole philosophy of foreign exchange rules will need to be changed to actually not introduce these moratoriums, prohibitions, and other things, but to incentivize companies, individuals, and generally businesses to use Ukrainian banking system and to use Ukrainian payment infrastructure more. And I think in terms of technology, the infrastructure is already capable to service the multiple channels, and it is pretty much, I mean, in many respects better than in many European countries. But unfortunately, because of these foreign currency restrictions, not many people and not many companies can use this infrastructure. Because of these restrictions, and as I say, the whole philosophy needs to change to this, but this will happen gradually. A third problem which I see is that Ukraine somehow is quite slow in recognizing the reality of blockchain technology and crypto wealth. In many respects, and if you look into statistics, Ukrainians are actually, and Ukrainian businesses, they already control above 20 or 25% of the whole worldwide global market of crypto assets. And unfortunately, this is not seen in Ukraine because these operations, although they are not illegal as such, but they are not regulated in Ukraine. And again, we are discussing for probably 6 or 7 years now the regulation of these crypto assets. We know that Ukrainian businesses control a significant part of crypto business worldwide, but we still do not see it happening anything officially in Ukraine. And during the wartime, we have seen that some businesses are using actually the stable coins to for basically cross-border payments. And again, this is not regulated, and then this needs to be urgently addressed, in my opinion. And again, probably wartime is a time, probably the last issue which I want to mention, is the time to be quite radical. For example, central bank digital currency. Ukraine already has developed actually this CBDC, but it has not introduced it for various reasons. And I think the time has come to basically move forward quickly and to introduce it as one of the first countries in the world to do it. And we are actually capable to show the world that we can be the first ones, the pioneers who will be doing things which not many countries are actually daring to do.
Thank you. And I've seen the raised hand from Vitaly. Vitaly, you want to add something?
Yeah, I would like to add about the cryptocurrency. That's really an interesting point. You know, I've been for maybe 2 years ago, I've been to the tax conference made by the IBA and ABA, that was a mutual tax conference, and we saw there some guys from Portugal, representatives from Portugal, and Portugal was a few years ago, we called them like crypto heaven. Yeah, that was the fact. And the first words of the Portuguese representatives were like, you know why we are the crypto heaven? Because we have no regulation on cryptocurrency. So I do not know, Igor, whether it's okay to have regulation or it's not okay. Maybe it's easier not to have the regulation. Maybe it's okay not to have this. In Ukraine, as of now, we do not have regulation. Okay, but so maybe we are the crypto heaven as well. It's as you have mentioned, 25% of worldwide cryptocurrency is held by the Ukrainians. That's I do not know whether that's the bad indicator. But okay, let's talk about the legal issues. We are as of now.
You know, this needs to be a light touch regulation, not really, because Portugal will introduce MiCA requirements, or has already done so, because this was mandatory for EU countries. So
they have introduced a lot of regulation for 1 year ago, it seems to me.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
it's not a crypto heaven as of now.
So we need to, because we are not yet in EU and we have flexibility, we can introduce light touch regulation and basically conquer this market, you know, and make it fully legal. Not just pretend that it just does not exist. Yes.
Yeah, I agree. And just to add on this topic is that we are finally at the final stage of implementing legislation on cryptocurrency. I hope maybe this year, I do not say this month, but this year we will get the, you know, that we have we have the legislation on crypto market, but this legislation depends on the special taxation regime. It will not go into force unless the taxation of crypto market is in force. So, and the taxation draft law is now on the final stage. Hopefully it will be implemented in the nearest month, and we'll get some cryptocurrency regulation which will allow to be like regulated and fully transparent for the world.
Thank you, Vitaly. Fingers crossed. Mariana, any final remarks from you?
Well, I would probably continue the sort of Igor, that we should use the opportunity while we are not an EU country. We should not blindly copy-paste everything labor-related EU. Really, bad idea. Lots of things there are not good for the current global economy, and the way especially it's implemented into our legislation, the way it's translated badly and then just stuffed into some law, it's really detrimental. My point of view, just don't touch. If it works, and it works right now, don't touch. No new labor codes, no you know, crazy things to be done just for the sake of being done. I tell a person who knows the Ukrainian labor law can very, very comfortably advise clients on it and operate its business in Ukraine. Right now, I think it's very, very happy balance of being modern and adjusted to the modern needs of employers. If something needs to be done, okay, introduce whatever clause is needed. But just doing, you know, the overhaul, frankly, my assessment, there are no enough competent people to do it properly right now. So just don't touch. Adjust gradually, if necessary, but nothing more. With the migration policy, I totally agree with Igor, it should be smart. I think, obviously, those individuals who have been fighting for Ukraine should have preferential treatment because they are defending our country. That means something has attracted them to Ukraine. I do think that Ukraine is a very, very attractive country to live in, relative even to many countries in Europe. That much I will say. So we should be selective about whom we allow to come to work and whom we allow to settle. That's definite. Smart migration policy is necessary because the modern world, and even historically, you can refer to the Zaporozh siege, where they didn't look at the nationality, only at personal qualities, like meritocracy in its purest form. Only those two things. Just we need to be smart and to think about our own needs and to value what we have, not blindly copy-paste bad things.
Thank you, Marianne. I would sort of echo you on the not the ideal timing for the major sort of transformations and reforms, and you know, in those areas which seem to be working. So, dear panelists, thank you so much for this quite positive but balanced. Yeah, Kolya, you wanted to sort of add something? Yeah.
There are two questions, if I'm not mistaken, in the webinar chat. So one is on taxes, and Vitaly may probably cover that. Does general...
Vitaly is handling, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the question is, Bogdan Demidont asked the question whether does the general rule of income taxes apply to crypto market income. That's the question is deep, much more deeper than it is stated. And actually, yes, of course, general rule of income tax applies to the crypto market, but there are a lot of questions in this respect. It's hard to answer this question as it is stated as of now, because it depends on a specific situation you have. According to the draft law, which should be implemented in the nearest future, you will pay only in case you transfer your cryptocurrency into fiat, and you will pay the difference between you buy and you get as the result. As of now, it is not regulated. You definitely not have to pay taxes while your cryptocurrency is not transferred into fiat. And but if you transfer it into fiat, there might be a problem, of course, in interpretation of current rules. And probably transfer into fiat, cryptocurrency into fiat, may be interpreted as full income, which should be covered by 18% of personal income tax. That's the answer, but really the question is not
specific enough.
Be, yeah, very specific.
Mykola, do you want to handle the second one?
The second, I'll try to handle it. It's the question is, what is the expected position of the Ukrainian government with respect to investment by companies invested in Russia, which arguably supported or indirectly funded Russia's war costs? I think the government and the security service are actively reviewing such cases, and in those cases where it's a clear-cut situation, the government is actually applying sanctions, in which case usually the assets in Ukraine are frozen and some other limitations are imposed. But of course, this is a very complicated issue every time for the government, because you need to prove this and you need to take into account numerous circumstances. As we all know, there are investors who just simply cannot leave Russia, and the Russian government just doesn't allow them to leave. Nonetheless, for us as Ukrainian lawyers, it's a very clear-cut case. We definitely do not support those businesses that support Russia. We do not work with them, and we of course encourage anyone who is still working in Russia to move to Ukraine, because this is exactly the point of our investment forum, to tell investors that it's possible to do a lot of business in Ukraine with a lot of success.
Yeah, thank you, Corey. I mean, the question is, I think, quite broad, but there are certain sectors which would be in general close to the investors with historical investments in Russia, like banking sector, because this is believed to be criteria of non-impeccable business reputation, having even, on the boards of the banks, the investors with the continuing investments in Russia. Other than that, I mean, I understand there will be difficulties with the bank accounts due to wartime regulations, but in general, it's not crystal clear. Why would investor who maintains the investment in Russia would want to invest in Ukraine currently? But this is a more philosophical, less legal question. So I'll keep it for a different type of panel. Dear panelists, Mykola, Vitaly, Mariana, and Igor, thank you very much for your time and insights. I'm hoping you enjoyed it yourself, and let's keep fingers crossed both for cryptocurrency news Vitaly and Igor are waiting for, but also for foreign investors coming to Ukraine. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Eliana, for moderating this. Thank you, fellow panelists, for your insightful comments. And thank you, everyone who listened to us. I see that we have actually kept the audience with us during 2 panels. It's a great achievement, and we will be in touch with the presentations and materials that our colleagues have shared during the first and second panel. In the meantime, again, anyone who is in Kyiv, please join us tomorrow for the live portion of the investment forum, which will be held in one of the major major venues in central Kyiv. So thank you so much. And with this, we are closing the first day of the investment forum. Have a good day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.